Nobody told you. There was no announcement, no ceremony. You just knew, the way you know any deep, permanent truth, that things worked a certain way in your house, on your street, and that was how they worked. You didn't know the phrase working class when you were 7. But you knew the best room was for visitors, not for sitting in. You knew the light went off when you left the room. You knew that when your father came home on Friday, the envelope went straight to your mother and nobody spoke about it again. These are the signs, 15 of them. Not complaints, not laments, just the particular texture of growing up in 1960s Britain when you grew up working class. If you recognize them, you're in the right place. 15. There was a room nobody sat in, the front parlour. Every working class home in Britain had one, or something that served its purpose. A room at the front of the house, cleaner than the rest, quieter than the rest, with the good furniture and the best china in the cabinet, and the curtains a slightly better weight than the ones in the back room. Nobody sat in it. That was the rule, though the rule was never stated. It was used for Christmas, for the vicar, for the time a relative came up from Birmingham who you only saw once a year, for the rare occasion when the doctor came to the house instead of the other way round. On those occasions, the parlour door was opened, the fire was lit if there was one, and the room was briefly inhabited. Then everyone went back to the kitchen, which was where the family actually lived. The parlour was working-class aspiration made architectural. You had a room for better things. You kept it ready. You never quite used it. That specific combination, the readiness, the emptiness, the clean curtains open onto the street, belonged entirely to a particular time and class and has almost completely gone. 14. Bath night. There was a night for the bath. One night. Every week. In most working-class homes in the early 1960s, before immersion heaters were standard and hot water was constant, bathing once a week was not a concession. It was a system, the back boiler or the range-heated water through the day. The bath was run in the evening. The family went in order. In our house, it was Friday. Father first, then my older brother, then my sister, then me. I was the youngest, so I was last. The water wasn't cold exactly by the time I got in, but it wasn't far from it. My mother scrubbed the back of your neck with a flannel, and the flannel was rougher than you expected every single time. Afterwards, you sat in front of the fire in your pajamas with your hair damp while she combed it into the right shape. The coal was still going. The towel had been warming on the fireguard. That was the whole week's worth of warmth and clean concentrated into one evening. And you didn't think anything of it because it was the whole street's version of the same thing. 13. Tinned fruit was the pudding. Not every night. Not most nights. But when there was a pudding, on Sunday at a birthday when someone was coming round, it was tinned fruit. Peaches usually. Mandarin oranges sometimes. Pears. In heavy syrup, poured into a glass bowl and served with Carnation evaporated milk, drizzled cold from the tin. This cost next to nothing and was considered quite good. Children who grew up eating it are to this day unable to smell evaporated milk without a completely involuntary response. The tinned peach was not a poor substitute for a real peach. On the streets where it appeared every Sunday, it was the real thing. Nobody discussed whether a fresh alternative might exist. It was the pudding, it came in a tin, it was sweet, and it was cold, and Carnation went on it, and that was that. 12. School uniform was second-hand, you could tell by the label. A school uniform bought new had a label with your name in ink inside the collar. Your name in your mother's handwriting. Second-hand uniform had been bought from a jumble sale or passed down from a cousin in the year above, and the label was either crossed out with biro or had the previous name faded but still legible underneath yours. Nobody made an issue of it. That would have required making an issue of most of the class simultaneously. The blazer for grammar school came from an older boy on our street whose family was going up in the world. His parents had got him a new one for the new year. It was 2 sizes too large when my mother collected it, and still a size large when I left school. She had it taken in at the shoulders, then let out again when I grew. The lining was mismatched from the outside, which was common enough. She ironed it every Sunday evening without comment. In 35 years, I have never asked whether that bothered her. It probably did. She wouldn't have said. 11. You knew your co-op number, not your phone number, your co-op number. The Cooperative Society, founded in Rochdale in 1844 on the principle that working people could own their own shops, ran on a system called the dividend, or the divvy. Every time you spent money at the co-op, a proportion came back to you at the end of the quarter. The percentage varied by store and by year, but the logic was simple. Loyalty paid you back in cash. Every family had a membership number. Children were sent to the shop for shopping and told to give the number at the counter without fail. This number was as important to the household as the address. Forgetting it was a serious matter. My mother could recite her number faster than her own birthday. I could recite it faster than I could recite my own address. It was drilled in. It mattered. The quarter end was real money, sometimes enough for a pair of school shoes. The system rewarded loyalty mathematically. For working-class families running on the tightest of margins, that quarterly return was not abstract. It was the shoes. It was the winter coat. Number 10. Nothing thrown away that could be mended. Socks were darned. Collars were turned. When a collar frayed on one side, it was unpicked and sewn back on, with the worn edge inward and the good side out. Sheets were sides to middled. Cut down the center when the middle wore thin, the two outside edges sewn together to bring the stronger parts back to where they take the most wear. A sheet like that lasted another 2 years easily. Jumpers were unraveled and reknitted. Curtains were relined. Buttons went into a tin when a garment finally couldn't be saved because the buttons could still be used. This wasn't frugality as a philosophy. It wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was the arithmetic of a household where the cost of replacing something exceeded the cost of mending it, and the woman in charge knew the difference. Working-class women maintained these skills at the same level that a tradesman maintains the tools of his trade, because they were not optional and there was no alternative. The knowledge went when the economics changed. A generation had it. Most of it was never written down. There was a tin on the mantelpiece. Everybody had one, or something that served. A tin, often a biscuit tin, sometimes an old tea caddy, occasionally a Carnation can with the top cut off, sat on the mantelpiece or the shelf above the fire. Into went specific money for specific purposes. The gas, the electric, the rent, if the landlord collected door to door, the Prue man on Thursday. Ours was a biscuit tin, Jacob's cream crackers, long since empty of crackers. It sat the fire on the left side and my mother was the only person who touched it. I don't remember a conversation about this being the rule. It was simply the rule, understood by everyone in the house without being stated. Moved money between tins, there were 2 or 3 at times, in a way that I now understand was a complete domestic accounting system, not informal, not approximate. The accounts. What them was what there was. When I see a biscuit tin now, even an empty one on a shelf in a charity shop, something happens that I would struggle to explain to someone who didn't have their own tin. 7 down, and we haven't reached the one that comes up in every conversation I've had about this. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. There's more where this came from. 8. Bread and dripping was a meal. Not a snack, a meal. Beef dripping, the fat rendered from a roasting joint, was kept in a bowl in the larder or the cool of the back room. It set into a pale cream solid with a dark brown jelly at the bottom where the meat juices had collected. You spread it cold and thick on bread. Salt on top. This was what you ate for tea when money was short. On some weeks it was what you ate for tea regardless. In Halifax in the winters when my father was on short time, which happened twice, maybe 3 times when I was growing up, bread and dripping appeared on the table without comment. My mother put it down. We ate it. Nobody said anything because what was there to say? You were hungry. It was food. It was what there was. I thought about later reading about the poverty tables of the 1950s, the way rationing had only just ended, and certain things were returning to shelves while certain other things stayed on the poor table regardless. Dripping once, what you had when there wasn't much else, and it tasted better than it had any right to. 7. The pawnshop tool. Not a disgrace. A tool. At its peak early 20th century, there were an estimated 5,000 pawnbrokers operating in Britain. By the 1960s, the number had declined significantly, but in working-class areas, particularly in industrial northern towns and inner-city streets, the pawnbroker remained an ordinary part of the local economy. You took something in on Monday, offered you a sum, took the item, and gave you a ticket. On Friday, when wages came, you redeemed the ticket and took the item back, paying a small percentage above what you'd borrowed. If you couldn't redeem it, it stayed. The item mostly taken in was the husband's suit. Not because suits were the most valuable thing in working-class homes, though they often were, but because the logic was exact. The suit was needed on Sunday for church or visitors. It wasn't needed Monday through Friday, so on Monday it went in. And on from back out for the weekend. This is such a precise solution to a cash flow problem that it is difficult to explain to someone who has never needed it. It required no shame. It required a clear understanding of what you had, when you needed it, and when you didn't. If you recognize this sign before I got to the explanation, press the like button now. It costs you nothing and it helps this reach the people who know exactly what I'm talking about. 6 left, and from here on, it gets personal. 6. Sunday dinner organized the whole week. Not just a meal, a mechanism. A joint of beef or a piece of pork went into the oven on Sunday morning. It came out at 1 o'clock. This was the main meat meal of the week, the anchor around which the remaining 6 days were arranged. Monday was cold meat and bubble and squeak from the leftover vegetables. Tuesday might be a stew made from the bone and whatever clung to it. Wednesday onward was likely something from a tin or offal, liver, hearts, brawn, faggots, the cheaper cuts that stretched further. The Sunday joint was with care and used with precision. The bone was knighted until it had given all the stock it had to give. Nothing was wasted. In this sense, the Sunday dinner was not indulgent. It was the beginning of a week's worth of domestic calculation wrapped in the form of a proper meal. The abundance of Sunday was what made the lean of Thursday possible. 5. Put to light off. 5 words. The complete philosophy of a household. Electricity was not on in empty rooms, not left on where it wasn't strictly necessary, not left on by accident and discovered later. Put to light off, said as you left the room, said to whoever was last out, said in the particular flat tone that meant this is not a request, was financial discipline expressed as a domestic reflex. You didn't waste electricity because electricity cost money and money was finite, and the margin was exactly that tight. My father said it the way other men said good morning. Not irritable, not a lecture. Just the rule of the house, stated once more in case anyone had forgotten since the last time. Nobody had forgotten. He said it anyway. I still put the light off. Every single time. I live alone now. I still do it automatically, leaving any room I've just been in. The economy that created the habit ended decades ago. The habit has outlasted the economy by 30 years and is showing no sign of going anywhere. 4. You were sent to the shop with exact change. You weren't given money. You were given exact money. The list was in your mother's handwriting. 4 items, sometimes 5, in a hand you'd know anywhere. You were told the total before you left. The coins were counted out into your palm, one by one. You were told which shops, in what order. You did not deviate. If something cost more than expected, a halfpenny on the bread, the specific tin not in stock, you came back and reported. You did not decide what to spend the difference on. You brought back the receipt and the change. The change was counted. Not because you were suspected of anything, because that was how the accounting worked, and you were part of it. Children who grew up running these errands can still, 50 years later, tell you what a loaf of bread cost in 1965. It's not that they tried to remember, it's that the information was important enough at the time to permanently stick. 3 left, and these 3 are the ones underneath everything else, the signs that never fully left. Don't go anywhere. 3. Your street knew your business, because the walls were thin, because the backyards were shared, because the windows were open in summer. In a back-to-back terrace, there was no garden between you and the street, and very little material between you and your neighbours. What happened in the kitchen at 11 was available acoustically to numbers 9 and 13. A raised voice, a new baby. A difficult night. A row the street was involved whether it had been invited or not. This created its own code. You didn't discuss what you'd heard through the wall. You pretended not to know things the brickwork had told you. You maintained fictions of privacy in a space that had none. And in that pretending, strangely, you built a very particular kind of trust, one that said, I know and I won't use it. And that is how we all live here. It wasn't community in the soft modern sense. It was more rigorous than that, built on the fact that there was no alternative and on the understanding, shared without discussion, that everyone on the street was working with the same limits. 2. Friday was the shape of the week. Not Saturday, not Sunday. Friday. Friday your father with his wages. Through the early and mid-60s, most working men in Britain were still paid weekly in cash, in a small brown envelope with the amount written on the outside. He came through the door and my mother was already at the kitchen table. He put the envelope down without ceremony. She picked it up. He didn't count what was in it. She did. She knew what the figure on the outside said, and she checked the inside anyway, because checking was the right thing to do. Then she began, in her head without writing anything down, the allocation. Rent, coal, electric, food for the week, school money, the PRU, the co-op. What remained, if anything remained, was what the week ran on. This happened every Friday with complete reliability. Neither of them commented on it. It was not a ritual that needed naming. It was just the week beginning where it actually began. I understood almost this at the time. I was sent to another room, and I went. But I saw enough of it over enough years to understand that the kitchen table on Friday evening was where everything that mattered about the household was decided by my mother in the space of about 10 minutes every week without exception. 1. Your mother sat down last. Every meal. Every time. She cooked while the family ate. Not because that was the arrangement anyone had agreed to, but because something was always still on the hob that needed watching, and the bread needed cutting, and someone wanted more tea, and the rhythm of it never paused in a way that allowed her to sit down at the beginning. By the time she sat, half the table had finished. By the time she'd finished eating, she was already standing again. This was not complained about, not remarked on by anyone, including her. It was simply the structure of the meal, repeated so many thousands of times that it ceased to be visible as a choice and became just the way things were. You noticed it, if you noticed it at all, only much later. Looking back from a distance, trying to count how many meals she sat down late to, and realizing you couldn't reach that number. Wondering when, in the ordinary run of the week, she ever ate first, or sat down first, or put herself first in any queue in the household, and then understanding that the answer was probably never, and that she would not have had it any other way. And that this is the thing about working-class mothers of that generation that is the hardest to describe to someone who didn't watch it happen at close range for the whole of their childhood. She sat down last. She always sat down last. And when she finally did sit, she was already thinking about what came next. Not all of this was hardship, but what runs through all 15 is something harder to name than hardship. The texture of a life lived inside limits, where everything that mattered got done anyway, where the kitchen table was the account book and the light went off every single time. You grew up in a system that required precision, loyalty, the dignity of not asking for more. Something of that stays. Long after the limits are gone, it stays. If you recognized your own house in any of this, subscribe. There's more where this came from.